Within the context of the human male and succubi dynamic, the human male, while being mentally and sexually dominated, is still the masculine party, while the succubi, as the recipient of the male's sexual energy, is the feminine party. It is for this reason that this video has focused mainly on men. Succubi are in general simply not interested in human women. Polarity is what creates attraction. Like magnets, like repels, where opposites attract. Count Orlok is not your average vampire. Indeed, he's not a vampire at all, but an other-dimensional parasitic entity, also known as a demon.
A demon? I beg your pardon?
That said, he does enter the story in a very vampiric fashion. He is invited in. In the opening scene of Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, we see Ellen inside her home calling for something, anything, to come and comfort her. Her invocation begins well enough as she beacons for a guardian angel, but it quickly goes awry when she, instead of calling upon a specific guardian angel, makes an open invitation for a spirit of any celestial sphere, anything. Her inner voice takes flight and ascends through the worlds beyond, where entities, benevolent and malevolent, have their being.
Come to me.
From the darkness, someone, something answers her call. In a trance, Ellen exits her house and walks into the moon-illumined garden, where she makes her deal with the devil. When asked by her otherworldly visitee if she will swear to be his ever after, she does. An unholy marriage is then enacted, as the two proceed to have astral sex with one another. Nosferatu is, at its core, a story about maiden and death, a Hades and Persephone type of dynamic that explores the dark side of the masculine and how there are men out there who prey on women and girls and wants to control them and exploit them sexually. That said, the story also explores how the demonic sexually exploits men. We see this through the character of Thomas Hutter, Ellen's husband, who is really sort of the archetype of the everyman. He is civilized, kind, polite, career-chasing, but also very gullible, very superficial, very materialistic, and easily exploited by the powers that be, powers that are under a demonic influence as well. I think this is a very important topic to cover, because when I look out at the world out there and all the men out there, I'm seeing the majority of them being very sexually responsible, easily taken advantage of, easily seduced, with the result being that they're essentially being sucked dry and really weakened and lessened as men, to the point where they become shadows of the former self. So in this video, I will, unlike the majority of the Nosferatu videos out there that look at the Ellen and Nosferatu dynamic, look at the Thomas and Nosferatu dynamic, the dynamic between the demonic and the masculine, and to really explore this topic and the dangers that feminine yin entities pose towards men, not just in stories, but in real life. My name is Jay, I'm the Occult Observer. Welcome to the channel, and without further ado, let's talk Nosferatu and sex demons. Let's go. From the inward-focused lunar realm of the astral plane, we, the audience, awaken together with our heroine and hero, Ellen and Thomas Hutter, into the daylit, time-focused, anxious, active, busy and externally focused physical world with all of its secular, practical matters, such as rushing to get to work on time. Yes, I know, this is the most terrifying part of the movie. But bear with, hey, did you see that? I think we just skipped over one of the most important clues of the movie. Sorry for the interruption, but pay heed, my friends. No, not to the gentleman with the pipe, or those ladies, or that bench, although that is a very nice bench worth discussing. There, the butcher. This is the last thing we see before we enter the busy street and the rest of the city of Visborg. This one shot sets the stage for the rest of the story. Nosferatu is imbued with the occult. This should come as no surprise, since the original 1922 movie was produced by Albin Grau, an occultist and member of the magical order Fraternita Saturni, the Brotherhood of Saturn, with Robert Eggers directing the 2024 movie. Eggers is himself a student of the occult, an interest that started when he was a kid.
I met this Latvian American artist who lived in Nashua, New Hampshire. I was from southern New Hampshire, and he had a show of his paintings and drawings at the University of New Hampshire. His name was Hyman Bloom, and they were like really intense. The drawings particularly were quite grotesque and horrifying, like demons on astral planes and all that. And he was, and I didn't understand this at the time, but he was like into the occult and into seances, and he just seemed like an interesting wizardly person. My parents met him at a dinner party, and I was enamored of his work and talked to him, and he gave me a book of Dürer engravings, and he kind of said, you know, if you can draw these, you can draw anything. And I didn't run home and burn my comic books, but I almost had that. I had that urge, you know, and that's a more vomit-inducing story. But it did change my perspective a lot, and I think I've become. I had burgeoning dilettante taste as a child, and then it really sort of came full force after that.
Full force indeed. The movies Eggers have behind him include The Witch, which is about, massive spoiler alert, witches. The Northman, which features shamanic rituals, psychopomps and yet more witches, as well as hellish imagery. And The Lighthouse, with its Lovecraftian horror elements and dialogue, Freemasonic symbolism and world building, mermaids, and a Luciferic striving for ascension. No witches though. Nosferatu is no different. Indeed, I'd argue that it's his most overtly occult film, with characters either being familiar with or deeply acquainted with Western occultism. The movie includes psychics and alchemists, with blatant esoteric symbolism and references. All that said, it does have clear Judeo-Christian iconography throughout, from the prevalence of crosses, both upturned and downturned, to the hexagram and, as I showed before, the pig. The pig is a demonic symbol in the Bible, and so let us turn to the good old book for a verse to help elucidate the symbol of the pig and thus the movie. In one of his spiritual escapades, Jesus comes across a demon-possessed man in a scene that puts one in mind of, well, a vampire story. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me!" For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he said, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us amongst the pigs! Allow us to go into them!" He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. This story is very interesting in view of a story that Jesus tells his disciples namely the parable of the prodigal son, a story that follows a young man who, after spending the inheritance of his father on whores and other things, ends up having to feed pigs and swineherd for a living. But what if I told you that the prodigal son wasn't feeding the pigs oats, but was in fact feeding them himself? You see, while vampires drink people's blood, certain demons allegedly suck people's life force from them. These demons are known as succubi. A succubus is, allegedly, a demon that comes in the night in the guise of an alluring human woman to tempt sleeping men into fornicating with them to extract their life force, often to the point of ejaculation. The word succubus comes from the Latin succuba, meaning to lie beneath. This is an interesting meaning. Does the man lie beneath the succubus, or does the succubus lie beneath the man? There is reason to believe that it is the man lying beneath the succubus, because some legends say that Lilith, the first wife of Adam, is the mother of the succubi. After refusing to lie beneath Adam, whom she considered herself equal to, given that they were both created from the earth at the same time in the image of God, she took off and left Eden behind. What she did from here is detailed in the Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, which says the following about Lilith. She roams at night and goes all about the world and makes sport with the men and causes them to emit seed. In every place where man sleeps alone in a house, she visits him and grabs him and attaches herself to him and has her desire from him. And all this takes place when the moon is on the wane. Henceforth, she would live atop men. To continue the Hebrew cosmology for a moment, Lilith is the opposite of the Shekinah, the female indwelling presence of God, the one the Kabbalists sought to reach communion with. She is essentially the same as Sophia, who the Gnostics revered, and Shakti, who the Tantrika worship. Where the Shekinah, Sophia, or Shakti empowers men and women alike, Shakti indeed means power, with women being personifications of Shakti herself, Lilith extracts men's power from them. She can then be said to be an anti-Shaktic influence, one that tempts men sexually and, if they fall under her alluring seductions, will become weakened and lessened as a result. Where Shakti gives life to a man, Lilith brings death. Something that the movie Jennifer's Body, starring Megan Fox, displays in brutal fashion, with Jennifer eating the male classmates of hers whom she sexually tempts. Note the French expression for orgasm, le petit mort, the little death, and contrast that with the tantric practice of semen retention, whereby the man becomes empowered by the presence of Shakti who flows through them, rather than their sexual force flowing out of them. We are dealing with two diametrically opposite ways of handling the sexual force. On one hand, we have a man who is dancing with the divine feminine who empowers him, and on the other, the divine feminine, in the form of Lilith, is essentially sucking the man dry. Based on this description of Lilith traveling around the world and entering the bedroom chambers of all the solitary men would make it seem like there are multiple Liliths. Lilith being described as the mother of all demons and all the evil spirits that fly about the world could also point to the fact that succubi are the daughters of Lilith, or individual expressions of this overarching dark seductress archetype who the Talmud describes as long-haired and having wings. While Lilith and company are seemingly not snobbish when it comes to which nuts to squeeze dry, they sure do seem to have a liking for entering the sparse bedrooms of monasteries. Whether because monks lived blue-balled lives that allowed for more sexual energy to be stored and stolen, because succubi got off on seducing men who were afraid and held negative views of them, or because the monks obsessed about demons and demonesses to the point of actually attracting them, we cannot verify as of the date of this recording. But what we do know is that these bald-spotted men, according to their own recordings of their nocturnal blanket hornpiping, to use a good old 19th century saying, were frequently visited by these enchantresses of the night. Journalist and classic scholar out of Cambridge, Catherine Nixie, accounts the monks' recordings. In writings of astonishing candor, the monkish it is laid bare as monks confess to being tormented by visions of naked women, not to mention other monks, performing the obscene sin of fornications, visions that lift the soul in torment and the thighs aflame. Monks write about being so overwhelmed by thoughts of sex that they are forced to jump up at once and to use ourselves for frequent and brisk walks. An erotic phantasmagoria danced, sometimes quite literally, before their eyes as a demon of fornication, a devious demon that imitates the form of a beautiful naked woman, luxurious in her gait, her entire body obscenely dissipated. It's easy to put down these nightly visitations down to simple hallucinations, figments of a sexually frustrated imagination of men who have isolated themselves in a monastery. Let me emphasize here that succubi, whoever or whatever they are not a physical phenomenon. They have no earthly presence, at least not while in their night hunters mode. But that does not mean that they don't exist. Rather, it means that they exist not in the physical, but on the mental plane, where they are just as real as the people that pass you on the street. And sometimes they approach and interact with you. Sometimes they even have sex with you. All while allegedly veiling themselves in the human form of a woman, perhaps even a woman that you know and love. Here is Harry Potter reacting to his own traumatic night adventures with a sex-craving demon.
Professor? Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
Now, I don't know how Harry could have attended a school for magic for 6 years without knowing about the Astral Realm, but then again, he didn't pay much attention in class. Still, this is an important lesson to learn. Everything you experience and perceive through your mind. Indeed, your physical experience down here on Earth is itself an imaginary experience. That is, an experience that takes place completely in your mind. Inside your head, there is a painter that is constantly taking in sense perceptions and interpreting them in an as faithful manner as possible, constantly on the canvas of your mind in every waking moment. This allows you to perceive physical objects and beings. But the mind can also perceive non-physical objects and beings, or rather more subtle physical objects and beings, also known as astral beings. We are simply talking about a difference of degree of the root substance that everything is made of. To see the other reality requires a shift in our conscious frequency and awareness. For instance, beta brainwaves put us in a mental state where we can perceive the physical world, while delta brainwaves enable us to perceive the dream world. The one is just as real as the other, or rather more real than the other, while we are in it. People who have their inner side more open than others, thus allowing them to see realities around us that others cannot see, have been called delusional and crazy in Western society ever since the Age of Reason declared that nothing exists that cannot be perceived with the 5 physical senses or measured scientifically. This makes Western civilization the only time and place in history of humanity where people don't take the spirit world for granted as a reality that resides above, beneath, and around us at all times, all under the arrogant presumption that we know better than those primitive peoples with their silly superstitions. We see this dismissive, literally close-minded attitude expressed throughout the movie in Friedrich Harding, a so-called irrational man who I prefer to call a blind man, because that is truly what he is.
Do not tell me you believe in such medieval devilry.
I do not believe. I know
I have seen things in this world that would have made Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb. We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Peniel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists.
But why Ellen? Why out of every spiritual being that she could have attracted, did she get a demon? One reason is surely that she performed her invocation while in a highly distraught state. Our minds are like satellites. They can both receive and transmit signals. The catch is that what we receive is determined upon what we transmit. That is, we receive what we resonate at when we transmit what we transmit. To put it shortly, we get what we give. The frequency of an invocatory invitation is like the stamp on an envelope. It determines which pigeonhole the message will be delivered, and naturally also who will be able to send us a response. In Ellen's case, she received that which feeds upon the frequency she was at when she made her invocation, namely grief, loneliness, and sadness, all of which are emotions that reside amongst the lower levels of consciousness that demons are drawn towards, just like sharks are drawn to a bleeding person. That said, there is a more general reason why Count Orlok attaches himself to Ellen. Here is von Franz's answer when asked by Anna Harding.
How should this happen to Ellen?
Demonic spirits more easily obsess those whose lower animal functions dominate. Demons like them, they seek them out.
What does he mean by this? What does he mean by Ellen having her lower animal functions predominate? The moon is the entrance into the astral world, hence why the prologue of the movie takes place during a full moon. Known as Yesod in Kabbalah, the lunar sphere sits above the sphere of the physical world of Malkut, just like the moon hangs above the earth. When placing the Kabbalistic tree of life on the human anatomy, you will find that Yesod is situated right on the genitalic region. Ellen, being a lunar girl, or as von Franz calls her, a lunatic, that is, a highly psychic and spiritually sensitive girl, makes her naturally very active on the Yesodic level of consciousness, where one becomes aware of the astral planes. But why would our lunar consciousness be sexual in nature? I recently responded to a Reddit post about why we experience strong sexual desire in the astral. The post referenced the classic book on astral travel by Robert Monroe, who helped popularize the term out-of-body experience. In his book, which I highly recommend, Monroe details the strong sexual urges he had upon entering this plane. He would sit or lie down to project himself out of body, feeling perfectly calm and unperturbed. But the moment he went astral, this deep unconscious sexual urge would almost become personified to the point where he couldn't think of anything else. He even describes how the sexual urge is not only an often dominant state on this plane, but that the sexual urge is what helped propel him into the realm of the astral in the first place, akin to how a rocket needs to activate its rocket launching system to be propelled into outer space. Once in space, it can float effortlessly, just as people are able to float effortlessly in the astral world once they are in it. Macrocosmically, Yesod, or the moon, is our entrance into the astral realms, while macrocosmically, Yesod is our own subconscious, where our dormant sexual energy is stirred into action, where the sleeping serpent has awakened and is ready to ascend back to where it originated from through the crown chakra and thus back to heaven. But most people don't raise their energy beyond the lower chakras because it's down here when we are sexually stirred that our life force becomes edible for the succubi. Before this point, our life force is too dense, and if it's risen above the lunar level, it becomes too fine and spiritual for them. As we've already established, demons are not physical entities, but live in the realm above this one, but beneath the higher realms. Hence why they must stir our libido in order to consume our energy. Now, before I get you guys out there all riled up doing incantations and invocations to Buddhi summon one of these entities, you need to know a few more things about them. First of all, and this should go without saying, their true form might not, or is very likely not, human at all. Second, and you might have suspected this after watching Nosferatu or seeing the clips that I've played, they might not even be female, at least not as we understand it. We see this in Nosferatu, where Count Orlok takes on the appearance of Ellen as he has his way with Thomas. From Thomas's point of view, he's having sex with his wife, although he of course knows better, which makes this all the more horrifying. Indeed, some of the ancients speculated whether or not succubi and incubi might not be the same entities, with the succubus, the female demon, extracting the semen from men, and then, instead of giving the semen to an incubus that is a masculine demon, actually turns into an incubus and then inseminates a human woman. And third, they want to suck you dry, literally and figuratively. They want to steal your life force. Not to give you a good time, they give you a good time to steal your life force. And all that this will do in the long run is sap you of your vital energy and make you tired, dull, sad, apathetic, and depressed. One of the key differences between Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola and Nosferatu by Robert Eggers, or indeed between most vampire stories and Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, which I appreciate, is that the latter is not trying to depict the vampire in a sexy light. In Coppola's Dracula, which is based on the original Dracula story that Nosferatu is also based on, the Thomas Hutter character, aka Jonathan Harker, played horrendously well by Keanu Reeves, is sexually enslaved by the brides of Dracula, who use the real estate agent as their blood bag. This is by all means a truthful depiction of the exchange between succubi and their human male prey, namely an exchange of pleasure for sustenance, until the man, so utterly milked of his manhood, loses his youthfulness and vitality, as shown by Keanu Reeves' character getting grey hair. While Coppola shows how the succubi present themselves and work in the illusory plane of our dreams, Eggers rips off the sexy velvet veil to show the monster behind the alluring female shape, an entity that is, in Count Orlok's own words,
I am an appetite, nothing more.
He has essentially merged Dracula with his three brides to create an androgynous demon. While succubi might not be females in the sense that we understand it, they are certainly feminine. Some speculate whether these demons might not in fact be androgynous, as angels are said to be. But given their association with the moon and the earthy, there can be no doubt that we're dealing with a yin of feminine creatures, which, on the spiritual levels, is as good as being female. Where the masculine gives, the feminine receives. Where the masculine is positive, the feminine is negative. And I mean this in a purely energetic way. We are not talking about good and bad here, but simply energetic function. Within the context of the human male and succubi dynamic, the human male, while being mentally and sexually dominated, is still the masculine party, while the succubi as the recipient of the male's sexual energy is the feminine party. It is for this reason that this video has focused mainly on men. Succubi are in general simply not interested in human women. Polarity is what creates attraction, a law that also applies in same-sex dynamics and relationships, where one party will always be masculine and the other feminine, or where one party will sometimes be masculine and the other feminine, but you will always see this dichotomy. Like magnets, like repels, where opposites attract. And so this final point is a message for you men out there. While you might not, to your conscious awareness at least, have had a sexual encounter with a succubi, that does not mean that you don't have a succubus that has attached itself to you. A demon that appears before you as a human woman is deceptively elusive enough. Still more deceptive and elusive is the possibility that you are unaware that a succubus is already taking your life force. Nowadays, with all the titillating material easily and freely displayed online, they don't even have to visit you in your dreams and fornicate with you. Instead, they can pull the strings of your lower chakras and get you to jerk off and come to porn again and again, week after week, year after year. In short, you might be a jerk puppet for a demon without even knowing it. There is even the possibility that the rampant sexual content pervading the world today and the rather blatant sexual Satanism that we are seeing in the music industry is a demonic influence meant to stir the lower centers to feed these entities on a vast global scale. This is naturally beyond our power to change individually as men. But what we can do, and what I hope that we will all strive to do, is to get our own house in order. And with that, thank you for watching, and until next time.